this computer. Well, hello. I am so excited today to be with April Ballesteros. This is the first edition of the book, and she told me that there's another edition that came out. But you'll see the picture. The picture on this podcast will be of her and I when she's handing me this book. So
Beautiful.
that's the next one. So April was, and I was just trying to remember exactly because I remember you doing a couple different things with me. But we started off as my business coach when I was in real estate at Century 21. So we started off there, and she actually ended up being my life coach. And one of the most humiliating things that she had me do, and I tell this story, was she had me send her a picture of my office. And my office was an absolute disaster. And she knew that because that's where things were in my life at that time. And so she really talked me through those things. And she was actually the person that pointed me into coaching. And so she took me under her wing and she kept pointing directions in life. So it's with great pride and admiration that she is here on the podcast today sharing her story. So she
Thank
is,
you for the opportunity.
yeah, the owner and creator of One Light Ahead, and she's got One Light Academy, which is a great program. And I'm going to let her tell you now about her programs and what she's got going on, and then I'll throw in with some questions. So April, go for it.
Goodness, we started when I was the director of sales coaching and mentoring for 35 offices, and that gentleman owns a multitude of offices now, as we know. And then I went out on my own and I became your personal coach under One Light Ahead. And One Light Ahead started in 2011 in the evening while I was a coach in the daytime for another company. So I went full time in 2013, expanded by 2016, 2021. I'm across the country. 2022, I opened up One Light Academy as a coach agency, a hub for coaches, and wrote a book in the middle of it, spoke on a multitude of stages. Actually got to walk one of the speaking engagements we got to do is at the Buffalo Bills Stadium, and we got to walk the actual field and do a whole tour of the location. And then I talked to one of the coaches that we were doing that event with. I said, okay, now you got to take me to one of my bucket lists. I've got to go to Niagara Falls now. One of my clients was just an amazing restaurant in California. Actually sent me to Mexico to do some strategic planning with them. So we are officially an international company, and we get to expand. As you know, I think you did the podcast with me a while back ago, and that one went international as well. And so we've just been on a journey, and it's been a blessing. And I'm so excited. We have so much to celebrate every time we get together.
Yes, we do. Definitely. Well, I want to talk kind of specifically about your journey since I like to talk about people so that I want them on their journey and understanding the steps that we go through. And it's not as often as easy as you talk about living unlayered. We got to go through some layers. So when you started your coaching career and it's completely unfolded, and I know that you are very a prayerful person. I know that about you. So how did you bring in, like, when you make decisions and moving forward, prayer, meditation, breath work, I talk about those things. How does that work for you specifically?
Well, I believe in the fact that we have all the different seeds and we go through the seeds of journeys. That's why I use the word planting seeds all the time. And yet, I did when I was discovered the role to become a coach and I learned all the different aspects of coaching. One of my prayers was commit this work to the Lord. And every day, most of the days, I remember and I get out of the way and I let the Spirit live within. And I got exposed to meditation over the past couple of years. I actually lead some meditations in some of our in-person retreats. I'm actually doing a retreat next week and leading a breath. It'll be a little bit of breath work and a whole lot of meditation. Yet I've learned especially when I started doing the retreats about 3 years ago, I didn't realize how much the body had so much impact on the mind and the heart and the emotions and the connections. And I've got to watch persons say something and act another way over the years, and then to watch it in one weekend or 3-day retreat, it's been an amazing experience. And so having the ability to have all the other tools is so, so powerful. And I love to ask questions, as you know. I'm ridiculous about asking questions.
Yep,
And
good ones.
thank you. And I've learned to ask God questions. I've learned to allow myself to just be peaceful. And there's something I'm wrestling with, or something, Lord, what scripture, what question, who can I serve? What what might be something I'm not hearing right now?
Yeah, awesome. And I think that's when meditation comes into play. I use prayer as asking, talk about that. And you look at athletes, and I think runners are the best case study on this, because they come out on the field and you can usually see them talking to themselves or talking to the higher power. They clear their heads and then they take a breath before they start running. And I mean, I'm sure you do the same thing before you're on stage speaking, or I mean, we go through that same process, and it does filter into our body. Breath work helps us create the action. So, and
Agreed.
as you were moving forward, what old stories did you have to let go of? I mean, did you have some old beliefs, old stories that were just like, you just needed to
So
let go of
many.
those? Yeah.
We were just talking about the fact that it's been a whole transformation journey. And I actually got to speak recently at the Habit Finder Retreat, which is another, we're supposed have resources there. And a gentleman was literally watching me before I was getting ready to speak. I was out on the swing and I was just experiencing and allowing that breath work and that prayer time and that meditation time just to be. And he literally shared the thankfulness of that. And I realized a couple of stories that I shared with them, and I'll share now, is I want to actually go back to 2006, the first seminar I ever gave. It'll be 20 years in 2026 since I've been speaking and developing curriculum and doing seminars and all that fun stuff. And one of my brokers at the time, because we both have the real estate background, and I had a whole 14 people in the audience. We did a 6-hour seminar, and they're all like, "How did this time go by so fast?" And the broker came up to me afterwards and he said, "You're just another Stephen Covey." And at the time, the tonality he used, it was almost offensive. And it made me realize that it took many years later to celebrate the celebration of that huge compliment. And then to realize, when you look up Stephen Covey, you find out who is this individual. Not that we are all about comparison, because we're not. It's just we want to demystify this. He's just another man that took wisdom and years of discipline. He's an author, a leadership expert. He's written books, and he's got quite a few books out there. Some of them amazing, and we quote him often, right? And we use I mean, the eighth habit. Though many people know of the seven habits, and there's an eighth habit that's really, really powerful. The reason I bring all that up is it's just one step. I mean, it'll be 20 years from that moment, and just a year and a half that I'm already scheduling and celebrating and planning that event out, because you want to celebrate those milestones and realize how far you've come and celebrate what's next. And that has been the journey. I have gone from a productivity coach, director of sales coaching, to a business owner, to a multi-industry coach, to now a coach of coaches. And we train Leadership Academy in New York, and now I went to Connecticut, and that touched the Virgin Islands. Now we've got 24 coaches ready to expand. And it was all a transformation of who am I? What's my identity in that journey? And at the end of the time, even when I lead the in-person retreats, I get to live from the inside out as a brave vessel. I get to be a voice to attract the people that are going to get value and are ready to hear the message.
Yeah. Nice. So when you were starting and letting go of those, was there anything that you like had to radically accept? Like, I know when I was going through my journeys continually, I have to, one, accept the fact that I actually have more knowledge than I think I do. That's something I have to accept, and let go of the stories that tell me that I'm not. And I also have to accept where I am financially. I have to accept where I am physically. I have to accept, those things. And those are the things I can't necessarily change today, but they're like my foundation of where I'm going to be going to and starting from. How about you? What do you have to radically accept?
Our limiting beliefs are so challenging.
Yeah.
And So it's so funny. I could cover an area in every one of those. As you know, I have a whole life wheel that's in part of our planner because we do have a one light ahead planner. And inside of that, every month I'm reviewing that planner. Where am I at, and what limiting belief am I being focused on and choosing? One of them I talk about in Slaying the Onion is the physical presence is something I work on all the time, and how I prioritize myself. And you have that in the future question because I'm so busy serving so often, and my children would beat up on me about this all the time, is that I had to learn that I had priorities. So I love to tell the juice box story and say, imagine everybody that is needing anything from you is a straw in your juice box. And who's responsible to fill up the juice when they take all of it out? And at the end of the day, I had to learn slowly but surely, and we talk about that often, is, how can I put a little bit more juice in my box today? What is going to give me juice? So ballroom dancing is something that is fun for me. I've learned the pickleball is actually kind of interesting.
So,
Uh,
yeah.
I've learned that, I mean, there are certain things that give me physical action and activity that help fill up the juice box and get some of the stress out, or and not that stress it can be a healthy thing with the appropriate matter of it, right?
So yeah, so you have to like radically accept that you don't always take good care of yourself. Okay.
I am the worst at
Okay.
making sure I have a priority. Yes.
Okay. So that brings us to the next question, the difference between self-love and self-care. So we know that
Absolutely.
self-love is, are we patient and kind with ourselves, or are we not comparing ourselves and all that? But then that comes back to self-care. How how do you go into detail now about, since that's, you have to accept that as your struggle. How do you do that? How are you prioritizing yourself, and how are you loving yourself versus how are you caring for yourself?
You know, uh, I love it. So, as you know, I wholeheartedly believe about the living from the inside out, and I operate in this interesting time clock. I always feel like we're going to run out of time, so I want to touch as many people as possible, and then I have to remind myself, put your own mask on. And
Yeah.
so, one of the things that I'm moving into now is realizing I don't have enough who's in my life. I don't have enough people. I'm choosing. That's why we recruited these 24 coaches, is because I want to touch more people. And in order for me to do that, I get to pour into them. And then I surrounded myself with some valuable higher thinkers, and that are pushing me to think of, how do I delegate this? How do I let go of this? How do I allow myself, and how do I teach people to connect? And somebody said it to me recently, April, I watched you show me how to facilitate a group in a way that built community. And that was one thing I wasn't sure how we were going to be, how everybody was going to receive that. And so there's a difference of having this immense passion on your life, and you want to just get it out to as many people as possible. And then you also get to lead by example and say, okay, and a lady said it to me a while back ago. She said, you have so much enthusiasm, so much passion. And yet, if I can see that there's a physical ailment in you, are you truly making sure you're leading by example in all aspects?
Yeah.
And physical elements sometimes is just eyes that are tired.
Right.
And I remember saying that to somebody sometimes, gosh, have you slept much? And you're like, gosh, do I look? And somebody will say to me, so I look that bad, huh? And
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
like, I've had people say it to me as well.
Yeah.
We want to not only our actions and and this is something I'm diligently working on now, is getting into the joy of menopause, not joyful. It's a challenge, right?
A lot of breathing going on there. A lot of breathing for menopause.
That's his own trigger, right? And thankfully, people are talking about it now. That is not a hidden thing. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
big deal. And and I don't want to be on drugs. I don't want to be on any of that madness. I want to figure out how what my body needs to get through this.
Well, I can tell you, I'm through menopause, 60.
Yay!
So I went through it well, and I don't take medication. I don't but I have a very regimented self-care program. And that's how I had to learn, where you've always been much better at loving yourself. I've been better at taking care of that. that but you have to do both in order to move ahead, to climb up the ladder. You have to do both. And it's a struggle.
It's a balancing act.
It is such a balancing act, but I can tell you it can be done.
It's
It can
exciting to
be done.
hear.
Yeah, no, it can be done. It can be done. And once you get through it, it's actually great.
You are a living example of that,
I
beautiful.
am a living example that I flipping am so excited to be through menopause. And I love this side better because I was the hormonal crazy person before. So it's really great to not have all those hormones flying in my body.
Just be quiet. Because anything coming out of my mouth may not be pretty.
So, so my next question, so we'll just go right into that one, is vulnerability. You know, vulnerability, I love Brene Brown. Vulnerability is being courageous. And when we go into menopause and go through that, we are very vulnerable. And our hormones make us very vulnerable. So how do we address when are you the most vulnerable? When do you feel the most vulnerable? And how do you use your self-care and self-love in order to get through that and to be courageous?
It's so funny. I have so many different answers there. So how do I use it? Sometimes it's taking a nap. So I've learned naps are a healthy thing. Because I work 12, 14, sometimes 16-hour days, and so sometimes a 10-minute nap is ridiculously valuable. Sometimes it's facing some of the obstacles you don't know you're ready to face, but you need to face them because you get liberated from it. Because our
Yeah.
mental experience also impacts our physical experience, right?
Yep.
And so some of the meditation, some of the breath work. I mean, oh my gosh, Paul walked us through a breath work at the retreat. And I came up to him afterwards. I said, I don't know what happened. I was like a mess. And he's like, no wonder. That's because you're holding all that stuff in. Because you hold space for people. And there's actually a book called Leading on Empty. I did it when I was getting my master's degree. And it was so powerful. Just a reminder. Like I said, that juice box. It's a constant reminder of so I've learned some days it's just not to speak. So and some days it's okay to speak and say, you know what, when I've got my bandwidth and my appropriate language, then I can say, can we have a conversation about this?
Yeah.
Uh, and thankfully, I mean, I praise God because the Holy Spirit operates. Coach hats on, it's all good. Every once I've had one moment and the client called me afterwards and said, "Who was that?" I'm like, I don't know. And thank gosh, thank you, Lord. It was a wonderful friend that said, obviously life is going on for you. And I said, yes. So that was when I was a good, and even one of my other clients called up and says, you probably need to keep it on your radar because it's real.
Yeah.
Your filter system changes.
It does. No, it does. And it does make us it's super vulnerable. But at the same time, I'm this is just my personal thing right now is because I have been turned off or felt intimidated when I'm comparing myself to people that are just too perfect or that are so consistent and so wonderful. And I can't relate to that. I mean, in my life happens. Stuff happens to me every single day. And it's got to be filtered through my emotions. It's got to be filtered for this. And so I feel vulnerable all the time. And I always feel like I have to step up and be courageous in whatever it is I'm doing. And I feel like that's the greatest thing I can show people is my vulnerability. And is, and I don't view it as someone goes, oh, you're always talking negatively. I'm like, it's not talking negatively. That's real. Those are my filters. That's the real life stuff that's happening. And, no, I'm not always perfect. And sometimes, it's okay. And I'm going to show you that I'm not always perfect sometimes. And I think that's okay.
Well, I've had multiple people tell me after they've read the book, whether I knew them or didn't, they said the fact that you were so vulnerable so quickly gave me permission to say I can look in the mirror. And some people have to put the book down, chapter 2, and say, I can't touch it. I have to come back to it. I had a
Yeah.
girlfriend that told me that she actually did a great testimonial for us, and she said it forced me to decide, am I ready for this? And then went back. And I have to tell you, one of the things I wrote down for this question is I was house sitting in Sacramento recently, and I had to keep getting off at the exit that my son was kidnapped on. And I had to keep getting off on that same exit. And I'm like, really? And I was like, it had to force me to say, okay, they're in jail. It's all over with. It's all done.
Yeah.
It was interesting.
But
Yeah.
it comes back and it hangs on to every cell in our body and it doesn't go away. And it's okay. That's the thing. It's it's okay. And I think sometimes we make it sound like it's not okay and that we have to hide those things. And that's difficult. And it's it's okay to expose ourselves and show those things.
Well, and to choose when. So I was sharing the story once with a client, and he said, how awful that those people were so messed up that they chose to kidnap your kid. And I'm saying, I'm sorry, I'm not there yet. I'm not in that place yet.
Yeah,
But now I'm like, okay, if you listen to Jelly Roll, and I love listening to him
yeah,
speak, and he's just like, how am I allowed to be on this earth and do what I'm doing now, right?
yeah,
And because people are transformed, and God willing, they're all transformed.
yeah, yeah, we
And
are.
and we just keep praying for the others. So
We do. Yeah, showing our light. I wrote this. Well, I'll put this at the end of the thing. But anyway, after going through all everything, when did you find your purpose, or do you find that your purpose keeps changing, or is it just it's out there and different directions keep changing? Was that an aha moment, or like when did you know or want to know, or did you have a
it's
purpose?
interesting. I added another Robert Hartman tool to my repertoire of toolboxes. And there's a definition attached to it, and it was actually the scientific definition for this tool, and it's called the definition of good. And it says something is good to the degree that it has all the attributes required to fulfill its purpose. And it's a scientific definition, yet what I realized, and when we're operating from thought patterns that aren't fulfilling our purpose, then our purpose seems like it needs to be changed. And yet sometimes it's just our perspective on the purpose. And so I would tell you my purpose has always been, how do people feel valued, seen, and heard? How do I inspire people to implement is my leadership definition. And how do I inspire them to utilize the gift they've been given? So it's interesting when you said, did the purpose change? As a real estate agent, I was taught I could become a coach and I could touch people, and and so the journey went through. I was just taught to cause productivity, right? Well, then
Right.
I had to realize, well, productivity doesn't happen unless they understand what thought patterns they're bringing, and how they're leading themselves, so if they're willing to lead themselves. And through the journey, what I've discovered is not only I got to discover who and what they were thinking and how they were applying it. I also had to help them understand what thinking pattern was serving them, because at the end of the day, we all want love. We all want to create experience. That's all we get to take with us. And yes, do we want to create impact? Yes, do we want to? There's some of us, like we were talking about, some of us that are excited to be on a big stage, and they can envision themselves on a large stage, and they know that they're just going from one stage of one conversation, which is a relationship, to being able to touch 100 lives or 1,000 lives or 10,000 lives. And yet they're figuring out how refined that message needs to be able to impact a life, because in one room you get to hold heart space for one person,
Yeah.
and your message has to be so strong that can hold heart space for a million people.
All right. So I'm going to throw you under the bus here for a second.
Please.
Okay. This At one point when we were in real estate, you introduced me to Mike Ferry coaching. And at that point, you wanted to become a Mike Ferry coach.
I do remember.
You remember
Mhm.
that? Okay.
Mhm.
And I remember thinking, huh, Well, that's interesting. The time, and I never saw you as a Mike Ferry coach. And but I so your purpose changed at that time from being so I want where was your thought pattern during that period of time?
Oh, well, besides the fact that when I called Mike and said I was contemplating going to work for him, right? Because you remember that.
Yep.
And I actually introduced Matthew, his
Yep.
I mean, we've been part of the real estate world for quite a long time, right? And Mike said to me, "Why would I train you to compete with me?" And at the time, I said to Mike, I didn't want to train them to compete with you. I wanted to train them to get them ready because I believed in his systems and structures. I believed in the discipline. I believed in the consistency. And many people are still working with Mike, right?
Right.
And Mike and Sabrina and that whole, I mean, some of my greatest friends I've met through Mike. Chris Heller and I have done multitude of conversations together, and he's an amazing person I met through Mike Ferry, right? Rich Rector, right? Well, I'm not sure I met Rich through KW, but a lot of different of our friends in the real estate world were through that journey. And what I realized then is that and it goes back to your conversation that we get to discover who we're becoming just as much as, and I tell people all the time, I don't compete with Mike Ferry ever anymore or Matt. All right,
No.
I still work to get on Mike's stage, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
So, and I'll be happy to get on any of those stages, Mike, Matt, any of those,
Yeah.
because I do believe in what they're doing is valuable. What I always believe, I even call the Working Genius, which is an amazing resource, Patrick Lencioni in the Table Group. And I called him up and I said, "You've got an amazing product." I said, "But you're missing a piece. You're missing the behavior thinking behind it." And he's like, we had a wonderful conversation. So I'm actually doing a presentation with both of them aligned next week to
No.
help see how they connect.
Nice.
So to answer your question, what changed for me is just a constant discovery of, you're right, I believed in parts of it. And over the, almost 20 years now, it's been a constant transformation of knowing what's in your toolbox and knowing that there's more.
Yeah.
There's to appreciate the resources you had and you have, because I still meet with Tony and Frankie and Adalia when I can. There's many other friends we have. I mean, so I mean, it's all been part of the tapestry of this life and journey we get to live. But
Nice.
you're right. I would have never been it. It would have been quite unique.
It would have been quite unique. Thanks for letting me throw you into there because your purpose is so different than it's so much broader than just real estate. I
Oh,
mean,
absolutely.
you work with
I
incredible leaders and not just salespeople anymore, but leaders of industries. And, so I mean, you would have been stuck.
that would be that limiting belief, right?
Yeah.
And that's what the
Yeah.
layers came from. The willingness to trust myself and to document this. This is years. I mean, this visual behind me is literally years of coaching and training and developing and discovering this divine gift. And I remember an author asked me once, "When did God put this on you?" And I said, "It wasn't overnight.
Yeah.
This
No,
was a journey."
he's dragging me through
And
the mud like this.
because there's layers and we all have those layers, and if anything, Mike did me a favor by saying, "Why would I do that?"
Yeah.
uh, and
Yeah.
at the time, and I'm like, you're right. It's beyond that. Real estate is just one facet.
Yeah.
Any vocation is a ministry.
It
Our
is.
vocation is a ministry, especially when we see that
Yeah.
and we can understand that it's just an opportunity to serve.
Yeah.
It's an opportunity to provide a need and truly be invested in the person, create an experience.
It is. It's an awesome experience. So as you're moving forward with your business and with your own personal life, how do you, and this took me a long time to really understood the concept of letting go of the outcome. Because, I have a tendency to be a little, at one time, super controlling and couldn't keep my office clean or organized, but I was controlling, hanging on to things so tight, that the water and the sand was running through my fingers. So how do you keep the essence of your business and your personal life alive without trying to control what the outcome and what the form is going to look like? Like, they talk about this, here's your clay, here's your hunk of clay. how are you gonna how are you gonna mold it? But what if you like how it looks today, but tomorrow you want something different? How do you let go of those things?
Boy, oh boy. You know, there's so many different answers to that question. For me personally, I have learned to be disciplined. And because the when we're holding, in real estate years ago, I used to say to people, if you only got one escrow and that falls apart, you get to feel it. You got 10 escrows and one falls apart and
Kind
you've
of
got a
relief.
healthy,
Yeah, you're like,
yeah, you
oh,
got, right? I got room for the next
I
one,
got room
right?
for the next one. Yeah.
And that's really, I mean, it's so funny because I've been going through a transformation now where I've been holding on to some experiences and I've been being my editor and publisher would tell you, God's been taking people out of your life, preparing you for the next season. And it was a real, and letting go and understanding that there are some that, I tell some of the clients, I'm happy to be a resource and I want to grow with you. And here's the next step.
Yeah.
And hopefully we align on that. And if not, I've got some amazing resources to help you with or support you in. Yeah, that's been a difficult every year. It's been a process to multiply and again, be willing to step on the next stage and let go of the previous stage.
Yeah. That's a good way of looking at it. Really good way of
It's
looking at it.
a daily process.
It is a daily process. You talk somewhere in your book, and I was like reading in it, you talked about you got to, I should have, I highlighted it now. I don't know where exactly it was, but it just made me write down this other thing. You talked about we can all be the light. Maybe it's on one of your web pages. Anyway, we can all be the light in somebody else's light to help someone else shine, right?
Mhm.
Something along those lines.
Yes.
And so this was just a mantra for my meditation that happened to be this morning, as I always say, a little prayer, a little meditation before I get on to do these. And so this is what came about, and I thought it was so appropriate. It's called "The Light Within Me Creates Miracles in My Life." That was a mantra.
Amen.
So the light within me creates miracles in my life. So I thought that was so appropriate for you and for your book.
Thank you. That's beautiful. And it's so funny when people quote back the book. I love it because once it's written, to ask me to quote it specifically, I have to go back to the book. I can tell you, I'll bring the book to the retreats. Okay, let's read it specifically as it's written
Yeah. Yes, yeah.
because the gift of once it's been, and I tell people you give yourself creativity space when you get it out of your head.
Yeah.
And it gives the brain and the heart and everything opportunity to create again.
It does. Well,
And
it amazes me because I'm writing my book and I keep going back and it keeps getting deeper and deeper and deeper. And it's crazy. It's just, oh, okay, this is the next level that I need to go to. And so it's taken some really cool form but more and more exciting about it every day, which is nice.
there's a young lady on TikTok and LinkedIn and Instagram and all them. Her name's Cody Sanchez, and she just wrote a book called The Main Street Millionaire. And she put a post when the day she opened up her book and she got to celebrate holding it and everything. You could just feel the emotion out of it. I'm like, I so remember that. It's a labor of love.
It is
It
it's giving
is. I
birth.
mean, you're literally giving birth. And that first book, a lot of people gave me so because my first book was just getting it out of my head. The second edition is actually making it consumer friendly. And I mean, really, the second edition helped people understand how to take it in pieces because I was just vomiting in the first book. And now it really is a labor of love, and you are the willingness to share it with people. That's a vulnerability. It's a gift.
It's good. So 20 years from now, if you could look ahead 20 years and see yourself 20 years ago, looking back on giving yourself today's words of wisdom, what do you, I don't know, like I would have to say my 82-year-old self tell my 62-year-old self today. What advice would you give yourself?
It's so funny. I played this out all the way to 75. because I've got until then, or I've got some years till then, thankfully. Even with my 12-year-old grandbaby, I tell my daughter we got good genes. So uh, with that, there's bigger stages. I keep that was the thing I wanted to say. There's more people to touch, and it's and to celebrate the opportunity of how I'm being prepared for each stage.
Nice. So
I'm very
take it
thankful.
slow. That's great. That's awesome. So do you have anything you'd like to tell people how to get a hold of you? I'll put your little, your little streaming thing on there. What workshops do you have coming up?
I have so we have onelightacademy.org, and it has blogs, the book, it has our leadership academy programs. There's 4 different leadership academy programs. You can
Nice.
just message me on any of the social platforms. YouTube is one I'm still learning. But Instagram, LinkedIn, all those I've got that. Even the TikTok, I'm still figuring all those out. Yet the biggest one, I probably do the most communication on LinkedIn. I have a lot of conversations going on there. So yeah, at the end of the day, the one thing that I tell people that you're any younger audience, take the time, and even older audience, every moment is precious. And somebody said to me today when I told them about the value of celebrating the moments, as they said, when you figure out how many summers you got left, it slows down your amount of time. It makes you realize how much limited amount of time we've got left. I'm like, yeah, put in that perspective.
Oh,
remember
yeah.
the remember the mastermind we did years ago? What's the next 5 years going to look like?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that was years ago. I still have the book. I just found it. Exactly. Isn't that exciting?
That's
It's some books like that that make you think, right? If
um,
it
it's
just how many might, and that's when I started Possibility Monday. And every once in a while, I don't do it as often anymore. But that, what's
yeah.
going to happen this Monday, and how many more Mondays do we get?
That's you. Well,
And
my boyfriend, he's 10 years older than I am, and he pulled out a tape measure and it said, okay, this is my life. This is probably how long I'll be. And he says, and this is your life, and this is what you have. And 10 inches on a tape measure when you're, going out. So he's like, are you sure you want to be here? Because you're 10 years younger and I'm 72. And it's like, I mean, it makes you think of things just a little bit differently.
well, the fact that you can have those conversations, isn't that awesome?
Yeah.
That you can have those, and I said to somebody today, I said, I've learned the hard way how valuable it is to have really intimate communication,
Yeah.
and to surround yourself with people that are willing to say, I love you, to surround yourself with people that are willing to say, you're valuable, and I see you, and I want to hear you, and I want to be fully present with you.
That's
That's
a
a
yeah, intimacy and trust or that's all I'm going to say for that one.
we align. It is always a joy to spend time with you, sweetheart.
It is
Is there any
awesome.
I always appreciate you, and I'm so glad that you are utilizing your voice to truly just serve. And
No,
it's
thank you so much
powerful.
for being here. You've always been there to point me in the right direction and be there. And I'm hoping to just be there for you as well. So
Thank you.
I just love you. And I think your business
Love
is
you.
amazing. And I've been to many of her workshops and I stalk her and all that other good stuff. So she
I
does,
suck you, sort of.
she does a great job, but she will ask some really great questions that make you think about stuff. So this was really
Whether
fun.
you like it or
I got to turn the tables just a little bit one time.
you did.
So
It's
thanks for letting
wonderful.
me do that. Yeah. So anyway,
We do.
thank you so much. I so appreciate it. And
I appreciate you.
thanks.